Amazing people from all over, including Earth. Is there anyone not from Earth? Hello, everybody. Welcome to Intro to Phaser workshop for the Game Jam, Time Warp Edition, on the theme of the changing of time, which is, the theme for the Game Jam. I'm super excited. I love Game Jams. I've wanted to do one for a long time with y'all, so I'm really stoked to be hosting this. So I'm Julien. You probably know me. If you don't, hello. It's great to meet you. Yeah, so some fun facts about me. I used to be an augmented reality developer and creative coding professor. That's what I did before joining Codédex. I've always loved writing curriculum. I've always loved teaching, so it's such a joy to be able to do that here. I love cooking and baking for friends, and this year I started taking dance classes again after taking probably a decade off, and I've been doing ballet, pop, and line dancing. So yeah, that's me. That's a little bit about who I am in and out of industry stuff. So today we're going to go through a bunch of stuff about Phaser, and we're specifically going to be focusing on how to build a simple platformer game. You might be familiar with platformers if you've played many of the early Mario games, but also just most 8-bit games, pixel games are platformers. So we're going to talk about Phaser. We're going to talk about how games play with time in general. We're going to talk about how to use Phaser to create this effect of the changing of time. I know that a lot of people in the opening ceremony had questions about does this count if I, as the changing of time, if I do this feature or this other feature? Is it just a timer? Is it something else? So hopefully this will answer your questions and also give you the opportunity to ask more questions and get more clarity. And before we get started, I would love to know if you could drop in the chat, what's your favorite game? It could be a video game, it could be a board game, it could be tag or freeze tag, anything that involves play. And then also, how many of you have started the Phaser course? Totally okay if you haven't. You do not have to have started the course in order to do this workshop or to participate in the Game Jam, but I would love to get a temperature check of where everyone's at. All right, FIFA 23, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, nice. Blue started the Phaser course. Overcooked, hi Ellie. Yes, I was like, oh, Ellie loves the game. Oh, that's Ellie. Splatoon, all right. Amazing. And oh my God, Saron SH completed the Phaser course, just the last chapter left. Last chapter left is really impressive. That literally was just published. So thanks for keeping up to date. And Blue, I'm really excited to hear that you got obsessed with making your own sprite sheet. I was really hoping people would do that. So I cannot wait to see what you made. So as I said, this is all happening in line with our new Phaser course, which I wrote. Chapters 1 through 4 are out now. I'm so excited for y'all to take it. And okay, let's get into it. What is Phaser? What is this word? This word is it sounds like it's a sci-fi term, but it is a JavaScript library and game engine for building games on the web. It's used by everyone from hobbyists to artists to indie devs and game studios. It's super versatile because it can be embedded into any website. And it could also be deployed to iOS, Android, and native desktop apps. So it's you can do so many different things. It is a 2D first game engine, which means it's sort of optimized to run 2D based games, as in flat 2-dimensional games. But you can make 3D games in Phaser. I would say that is hard mode, but it is possible. There's a mode in the library where you can toggle on a 3D mode and use 3D assets. But it is optimized for 2D, so things like images and sprite sheets, Blue is making a sprite sheet, and it runs on the HTML5 canvas, which is why it's so easy to embed in websites. And so that being said, there's a lot you can do with Phaser, even if you're just focusing on 2D. You can import animations, so sprite sheets, as sort of Blue referenced. Sprite sheets are image sequences that you can thread together to create animation. So if you've ever seen a cartoon, especially old classic cartoons, before things went fully digital, often that's frame by frame drawn animation. And sprite sheets in games can work the same way to create the illusion of movement and animation. You can create entire worlds with realistic physics. There is a project tutorial actually on our site. Hopefully Eric can link that I wrote about adding real world physics to your games. And you can create like really realistic like jumping effects. You can sort of create interesting like spell casting effects. You can play a lot with animation to add physics. So all of these things like sprite sheets and animation, this sort of thing that we know about maybe from watching cartoons as kids or now, these are things you can use to make your games feel even more alive. So you can, as I said, build games in 2D and 3D. Maybe someone else, like Ellie, could maybe drop the project tutorial link in here. You can embed games directly into site. You can actually make multiplayer games, which is really exciting. You can do some server-side stuff if you're building games locally in your own IDE. You can create games you can actually play with your friends. Like you can be in the same room at the same time, which is really exciting. If you've used P5.js or other creative coding libraries, you can draw custom shapes. So all of the cool creative coding things you can do, the cool generative art things you can do with P5, which is like basically like a library on top of JavaScript, you can obviously do with JavaScript, and then you can use that with Phaser. You can also combine Phaser and P5. There's like all sorts of ways you can use these libraries that you've learned over your time here, learning on Codédex and elsewhere to make cool stuff. Share games with friends, and even make multi-level games. So you can make games that have, multiple levels, games that restart. If you go through the Phaser course, spoiler alert, I do teach how to make restart games and sort of like win conditions, lose conditions, etc. So that's all about Phaser. I would love it if y'all spent like 5 minutes playing a Phaser game. I'm gonna write this link in here. And then we can think through some questions together. So I just dropped in the link. It might not have formatted perfectly. So let's take 5 minutes. And as you're playing a game, and like don't overthink, just like pick any game. I would love to know some thoughts you might have about the game. So if you would link to the game, and then we can talk through some things you notice, like rules, what controls, if there are characters, and most importantly for this workshop, if there are any time-based elements. So I'm going to set a timer for now. We should be at like, let's say 5 minutes.
A few moments later.
Point of this exercise is just to sort of dissect a few games. But I'm going to move on to our theme. So the theme of the game jam is the changing of time. I think this is really exciting. I think that there's so much to play with here. So these are some things that I've been thinking about. You can tell I got really excited and started writing a bunch of things down. So some themes I've been thinking about with the changing of time are these ideas of time slowing down, speeding up, freezing, rewinding, or even undoing an action, right? Time looping, like Groundhog Day style, doing the same thing over and over with different consequences. Or maybe if you make one choice in one of the time loops, it affects a future time loop. Time traveling, shifting between past, present, future. Butterfly effect, sort of change one small element to change the future. There's this game called Super Hot where time moves only when you move. So a timer might only count down when you're moving. You could try different things with like flipping that around, like time only freezes when you move, or you can play with it in that way. Or maybe time works differently in different rooms and environments. The difficulty can increase over time. Things like gardening or environmental games like planting and harvesting crops, changing seasons, restoring ecosystems, and terraforming planets can be time-based as well. And then freezing or adding immortality to certain, or like invincibility to certain characters or elements, but not others. So time can mean literally time travel. It can mean, playing with that sort of thing, but it can also mean like how things are affected by time in your world. So is there anything else you can think of, or maybe even games that you've played or Yeah, anything else you can think of that's time related that might be relevant here, and feel free to drop in the chat. It can be super out of the box. It can be whatever, like anything that feels relevant, just put it in. Yes, Braid has a lot of time related puzzles. Deb, could you expand on that a little bit? Aging of a character for sure. Aging is a fun dynamic to play with. Memories, that's a really good point in Augie Logic. Yeah, maybe like you're playing with memories and how you move through time to access them. Deb says, I like the one where you move right, time goes forward, and moving left makes time goes backward. That's in Braid. Yeah, that's really cool. Cat's Cradle are you referring to the phaser game? Yeah. That one has, I think, some time-based elements. Very cool. Puzzle where you meet in the middle of a timeline from both ends. That's really cool. Well, yeah, so maybe it's multiplayer and people are trying to get toward each other in a puzzle. Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, everyone. I love how much people are sharing about games they've played and dynamics that they're working on in their own games. Okay, before we get into like the actual phaser code, does anyone have any questions? Deb says Prince of Persia time rewind is a resource. Very cool. Yeah, you could have limited time rewinds, limited ways to play with time. So constraints are what make games interesting and challenging. And if you have not played this game, Quap, it's really difficult, and I'm really bad at it. Lagoon Lab says, yeah, I'm a complete beginner doing this game jam. Am I crazy? No, you should definitely do it, please. Beginners, please do it. I think sometimes beginners make the most interesting stuff. Because you don't have like all of the like tropes in your brain yet. So you should just do it. Okay. Let's get into it. So everyone open a new HTML, CSS, JS project in Codédex builds. You could also use your code editor of choice. You just need a way to preview your canvas. So I'm working in builds for ease, especially for beginners, but you feel free to use whatever IDE you want. So Phaser is a library and it's also a game engine. It's kind of like a JavaScript library that contains a game engine, right? So all you need to do to access Phaser specific code inside of JavaScript is to copy and paste this little line into your code, into your index.html. Okay. Nice, thank you. Okay. So if you've already done that, congrats. You just added the Phaser library to your project. That's wild. That's all you need to do. Okay, now tab over to Script.js inside of builds and add this code. So here's what's going on in this code. This is called the config object in Phaser. It's basically how you configure your settings for your Phaser scene. So we're basically choosing that we're using the Phaser auto renderer. So I think the other type you could use is like WebGL if you were doing 3D, but we're using 2D, so we're doing Phaser auto. Setting the width and height of the canvas, setting the background color, and then there's this little bit where we're making sure that we will include the preload create update functions we're about to create inside of the preload create update properties of the scene. So this is just like very top of your Script.js. Once you have done that, you can add these empty functions. So function preload, function create, function update. And then this little line that basically tells the Phaser game engine to run the config object, to reference the config object as it sets up the scene. So if you've used P5.js, as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of similarities here. We have a preload function that will be loading our images and any audio we might be using before the canvas renders. We have the create function, which will run once at the very beginning of the renderer. And then we have update, which by default runs 60 frames a second. So you can imagine already, like as you're sort of structuring your code, that certain things might naturally go in preload, create, and update versus others. Thank you so much, Blue, for pasting that in. So I'm going to sort of keep moving, and I will also be linking some Codédex builds here. So don't worry if you're not quite with me yet, or if you're not doing this live. We will be sending all of this like in the chat as well. Okay. Now we're getting a little bit more intense, and I can sort of explain what it is that's going on here. So assume that we've already loaded the config object and we already wrote that line, the const game equals new phaser.game config, right? That has already happened. We are focusing on what is going on in the preload, create, and update functions. So we need to create variables to represent our player and our cursors. So like, let's say this scene, like I'm brainstorming, I want a simple scene where there's a background, there's a character in the form of a sprite image, and the character can move up, down, left, and right when I click those arrow keys. So this is what I would do. In preload, I would load the character image. I'm naming it character. And that will just make sure that the character image is ready to go and ready to be used before the canvas even renders. So there won't be any lag or any trouble like loading and reloading the image. In the create function, I would add the image and assign it to the variable player. And then I would also assign this built-in function inside of Phaser that lets us use our computer's cursor keys. So this basically like lets us access the up, down, left, and right arrows of our keyboard and use them as inputs. So cursors is this.input.keyboard.create cursor keys. It's basically like saying like, hi, Phaser, please let me use my cursor keys. So create happens once at the very beginning after we've loaded. And then what's going on in function is this is going to be happening 60 frames a second. So we're creating this local speed variable and setting it to 3, where it's going to be like not super fast movement. And then we're saying if the left cursor key is down, is pressed, the player's X position is the negative of speed, basically. Like it's like the player's X position is itself minus the speed. So every frame if we're holding down the left arrow key, we're subtracting 3 pixels from the player's X position. And then the opposite happens if you hold down the right arrow key. If your right arrow key is down, every frame you're moving to the right 3 pixels. And then the same going up and down. So you can sort of see like you're setting up how your cursors are going to work. So that is basically the most simple bare bones version of a phaser scene. And this is what that'll look like. You have this little sprite. We provided the Imgur link, and that sprite is going to be moving all around. So this sprite is, this is a little phaser scene. This is like the most basic thing. You might feel like this looks familiar, like, in Codédex worlds, when you move up, down, left, and right, you're sort of doing, like, this is sort of the way that it's built, actually. Obviously more complicated, shout out to our engineering team, but like, this is what is going on behind the scenes at its most basic level. Okay, but that in itself is not a game. So if we wanted to turn that into a more classic platformer, we would need to get way more complicated. So at this point, I'm going to open up a build link for y'all, and we're going to talk through a full-on simple platformer scene using the same sprite, but introducing things like drawing shapes, introducing physics, setting that physics mode to arcade, which is sort of optimized for a 2D platformer, with physics introducing gravity and velocity, and collisions between a player and the platforms. So I will go to this link, and now I'm going to drop this in here. So please follow along with me. Okay. So please join me in builds, and let's walk through this file. Same as before, index.html. All that's happening is we're loading in the phaser library in a CDN. Same thing we just did. CSS stays empty. Assets, never heard of it. Nothing's in there. We're working with an imgur link. So here's what's going on in the code. Our config object looks a little bit different. We are still using the phaser auto renderer because it's still in 2D, but we've slightly changed the background color to create a sort of sky blue effect. We've added physics, and it's specifically arcade mode. You can notice that you can jump from platform to platform, you can fall down, and the reason that any of this is working is because of physics properties. So we've turned off the debug. If we set debug to true, it would show the physics boundaries of everything. So you can sort of see, you see these little boxes around the platforms and the character. You can see that there's this really thin green line that you start seeing whenever you have the character jump, and it sort of tells you where it's about to go. So that's super helpful for debugging your physics. Same stuff going on with loading the character image, but we've added gravity. We've added Y-based gravity to the physics properties, and we've actually added physics to our character sprite. And we've also basically said that this player, this character sprite, which is the player, collides with the bounds of the world. Like physics is activated. We've created a hitbox, so that's this little magenta square around the player. We've offset it a little bit from the size of the image. Wait, you want me to zoom in on the code or the here? Yep. Okay, great. We've created like a hitbox around the sides of around the image, because sometimes like the sides of the character that we want to collide with the world might be a little bit different or a little smaller than like the full-on size of the image. And we've also created this array, this empty array that we fill with platforms. So these platforms are rectangles that we drew. They're just green rectangles that we drew. And we activated toggle on physics and drew them. So we're making these platforms. They all have physics enabled. We've got the ground platform on the very bottom, so you can actually fall on the ground and not just like fall through into the void. And then we have these three platforms. And for each of the platforms, we're adding colliders, have those cursor keys still. And basically, we added like a little extra power up for if you like press, let's see, player block down, yeah. We've added a little bit of extra power up for jumping. All right, so that's like the most simple, basic version of a platformer. But we can do so much more than that. So this is, I showed you just now, but this is what you should see. You should be able to see this character jumping up and down if you're able to run that code. Okay, I'm going to pause for questions. Here's this co-op cosplay. Before we move on to the sort of last section of the workshop, which is actually how to incorporate this changing of time theme into a phaser platformer, are there any questions? It's okay if not, but let me know. Now is your opportunity. We will also have opportunity for questions at the end. So, okay. Okay, so back to the theme of the changing of time. That was it. Can we incorporate? Cool. Good typo, Julien. How can we incorporate the changing of time into the simple platformer? Drop your suggestions. Owl Jacob says seasons. Great idea. Player speeds, true. I think Eric might be psychic. Fast reach jump, true. Okay, cool. All right, so we've got some great suggestions in. So let me walk you through some options. And this is not at all an exhaustive list. Also, feel free to keep dropping things in the chat if you want. I know people are still talking. I just want to make sure we have enough time to get through everything. So time freezing, yeah, you can definitely add that. So Phaser has this really cool property called timescale, and you can adjust it. So I think 0 is frozen, 1 is like normal time, and then anything above 1 is sped up. So anything between 0 and 1 is like slightly slowed down. So you could be like, you can use this timescale property to set things into slow motion by adding them, by making timescale 0.5. You can make time speed up by making it 2, and you can freeze time by making it 0. Oh my gosh, size growth over time from Dino to Godzilla, so true. You could also do the physics dynamic that's in the game Super Hot, which I know someone in here said they like, where time only moves if you move. So basically, in this if statement, if none of the keys are pressed, if none of the arrow keys are pressed, if none of the left, right, or up arrow keys are pressed, because you don't really press down in a platformer, then you freeze time by setting the time scale to 0. If at least 1 is pressed, time passes as normal. So this is like a super simple way. This is like just a couple lines of code to create a game mechanic that is from a super famous game. And then maybe time works differently in different environments or in different zones. So maybe if the player Y position is less than 300, the gravity is set to 200. So it's like a really floaty room, kind of slow, floaty movement. And maybe if the Y position is otherwise anything more than 300, then gravity is 600. So it's a normal room. So in this sense, like even though we're not literally writing like the word time, it's not using the property time scale, it still creates the effect of slowness and quickness. It still makes it feel like time is passing. So let's put a few of these strategies together. I made this build for y'all. So in this build, there are a few things going on at the same time. You can press T to toggle between past, present, and future. And you can press D to make time go fast, and S to make time go slow, and nothing to make time stay at its normal rate. So let's see what this looks like in practice. And I can zoom in again. So as before, nothing's going on in HTML. But if we go into our Script.js, first of all, let me show you what's going on. Okay, so this is like time, we're in the present, and the speed is normal. If I hold down D, while I'm jumping around, time is moving really fast. And if I'm mid-jump and I go slow, I hold down S, now time is slow. Oh my gosh, I totally forgot to drop this in. Sorry, guys. Oh, Blue got it. Okay, thank you. So yeah, it's kind of interesting because you can start a jump from D, you can like move around, and then like while you're in the middle of the air, you press S and everything slows down. So that's one way. As I mentioned, the other thing that is happening here is if you press T, time changes and you actually time travel. And in this case, that means, the scene looks a little different. Press T to go to the future, press T again to go to the past. It's obviously like sepia toned. It's like a black and white old-timey photo. That's why it's the past. If you press T again, you can go back to the present. So in this case, I'm just changing the colors of the background, but you could do something where for example, if you're in the past and you collect a certain collectible, or you defeat a certain enemy, or you step on a certain platform, you collide with something, you like cast a certain spell, it can affect the things that happen in the present. So you can imagine that you're like creating different conditions under which the past is affecting the present, which then affects the future. Maybe like over time, the thing that you did in the past gets bigger and more impactful in the present and then in the future. So there is a lot you can play with time travel. So how did I build this? It's actually pretty similar to the existing simple platformer from before. I'm just adding a few extra conditions and effects. So one thing is I have this array of strings of the past, present, and future, this like list where that's sort of changing the text. So some of this is like about the display. Some of it is actually a variable tracking the current time period that we're in. We've set up some text. So I guess the text stuff might be a little bit new, but let's see. So I added these cursors that are toggling different modes, and I added text. So to add text, it's pretty simple. You like write this.add.text, then you write the position of the text, and then you write the text itself. You can specify things like font, fill, size, stuff like that. I have this variable keeping track of speed, and I am defining the time speed controls. So we have set, we basically assigned speed up to be the cursor that is tied to clicking S. We've assigned slow to clicking D. We've assigned time travel to clicking T. So these properties are now linked to these cursors, or to these buttons. And then when those buttons are pressed and speed up is toggled, or slow down is toggled, or time scale is altered, we change whether we're going slow or fast. And a similar type of thing is happening with the time travel, where we're sort of, every time T is pressed, we are toggling between, we sort of pressing the time travel button, right? We've tied T as the cursor to a time travel button. And so every time T is pressed, time travel is happening. Press T, time travel happens. And so basically when time travel happens, we are incrementing the variable that is tracking the current period that we're in. And when that's happening, when we're in the past, we're changing the background color, and we're also changing the fill color of our platforms. When the period is present, we're doing the same thing. When the period is future, we're doing the same thing. And so basically, when we're in the past, the background color changes to sepia and the platforms change to like a darker sepia. These are both actually hex codes, hexadecimal codes. They just need to be written in a slightly different format for the fill color. But basically, like, instead of a hashtag, it says 0x. In the present, it's our normal color state. It's sky blue, normal green. And in the future, we have dark purple sky and neon green platforms, because everyone knows the future is like, radioactive cyberpunk energy. And then finally, we're setting that time period text and filling it with the corresponding time period. So this is like a super sort of basic skeleton of a few ways you can play with time in a phaser. And hopefully this also gives you a sense of time as being a thing that is not just about timers, but can also be about gravity, how physics works, how colors work. You could also, like, I could have done something where each time I time travel, my character changes. Like maybe my character is wearing like an old-timey outfit in the past, and they're wearing like a weird robo mech suit in the present. You can show time changing visually. You can show it with physics. You can kind of do whatever. And it is alive. Yes, definitely it's alive. IK Python man. Yeah, so, I sort of showed this, but basically time traveling is just sort of toggling between these different color modes and changing the text in this case, and speeding up and slowing down is changing how gravity works based on the key that you press. So that was a lot of talking. And now, last but not least, we have 9 minutes left, so we are making good progress on time, and we have actually, yeah, like 9 minutes for questions. Let me know if you have questions, and make sure to check out the phaser course if you haven't already. And yeah, you can ask your questions here, and also you can also reach out to, I would say tag, don't DM me because I won't respond, but tag any code mentors in Discord and we'll be able to unblock you. So yeah, please ask me any questions now. Owl Jacob says, so my question is, how good is Phaser handling mobile devices? So like, what's the experience and if it's good enough? I'm not totally sure, honestly. I think it depends on the device. I think you'll need to, they're also constantly updating the library. So yeah, I would say, let me look into it and get back to you. But I've mostly used it on desktop. I would say, Al Jacob, a good way to find out is to try playing some of the itch.io games, some of the itch.io phaser games on your phone. IK Python Man says, can I create Dino Chrome game with phaser? I mean, like, yes, I would say that for the sake of the game jam, I would do something like more custom and based around the theme, but I think you could definitely recreate the Dino Chrome game, the sort of like platformer, if we're thinking of the same thing with Phaser. Which is easier, Phaser or Godot? I don't know Godot. Eric, do you know? Or maybe I don't know if Ellie does. They're both easier. Okay, great. Oh yeah, good question. Eric, do you already know some Python or JavaScript? Yeah, that does determine. Oh, tips for beginners. My tip for beginners starting out with game dev, especially with Phaser, is it's more important to get something working than to get something perfect. So just like start small and keep your concept constrained until you've gotten that thing working. Yeah, make it exist first, as IK Python Man said, is the most important thing. I am definitely prone to like getting really excited and like making things too complicated in my head and then trying to execute on something like really big before I've even made the small thing. So like make a prototype first. And like if what you submit is a prototype, that's great. That's actually what we're expecting. Like the version of it that exists in the world is the best version of it. So whatever that means, do that. It doesn't have to be super complicated. Some of my favorite games are super simple, like text-based games. So um, yeah, and also my other advice is like make something you're actually interested in. Like there's not a correct type of game to make. Like there we have a theme, but I think as a team are like all into different kinds of games and don't try to sort of match any of our tastes in games. Like make something you're excited about. That's the point. And if you're excited about it, that'll come through. Suppose an image is of 80 times 80 and I want to make it 64 times 64 and then 4. Can I code using phaser methods? Saranj, are you asking about converting image sizes? You can scale things down in phaser. So like if you have an image that's 80 by 80 pixels and you want it to be 64 by 64, you could either scale it down in another program or you could use phaser's scaling property. But yes, you can definitely size down. Yeah. I'm just gonna grab the link, presentation link for folks. Let's say I got a map. What's a good way to handle collisions, especially if I got buildings? Um, yeah, there are a lot of different ways to work with colliders. I think it depends on if it's like a platformer, like a vertical platformer style, or like bird's eye view. But I would say I'll Jacob. Let me see. Let me find. So let me just share the slides. Okay. Here are the slide links. This should work for everyone. Yeah, so Al, Jacob, there are a few different ways to handle collisions. There are a few examples on the Phaser site that are using different strategies. So I would definitely check these out. I should have linked to this before, but you can do cool stuff. Like you can actually like create collisions based on a CSV based map that you import, like a tile map. You can do collisions with like platformers, because like one thing in Phaser is you can kind of, it's cool, you can like import data, you can import CSVs full of the data that contains your map. And then using physics, you can read what's in your CSV and create collisions that way if you want. Or the more simple way is to create colliders for like each of the objects. And there's cool stuff you can do, like you can sort of have this property where like you can jump off of walls like this. So I definitely didn't cover like all of the physics you could do by any means. Also, I just realized I'm not still screen sharing. Sorry. This is the one with the this is the one with the CSV arcade map. And let's see. Blue, I use Texture Packer, but it's not free, though I think you can get a free trial. And I think Eric put in some other good free resources. Saranj asks, how do I make the background look like it's moving along with the character movement? Do you mean like the background, like as you're moving to the, for example, to the right in a scene, like you can like move through, like the background will like expand to give you more space to move? Yeah, so I think you can do that with camera basically. So it's like you would have a camera, and that camera would, as you move, the camera would follow you, and like you would have a larger background texture that you would move the camera across. So there are a few different ways to do that. Let's see if I can find an example. Camera technically isn't a physics property, but yeah, there are a few. Here we go. Cross-scene object. Yeah. So check out, it should be somewhere in this link I'm about to paste in. Also, y'all, I think we are at time. So we need to wrap. But please post any remaining questions in the Game Jam help channel. And yeah, feel free to tag us, and yeah, let us know if you have any questions. Thank you so much for coming. This was really fun for me, and I cannot wait to see what you make. Thanks, y'all. Bye.